I used to be a natural scientist, and then I became a founder, and now I'm an investor. And that's a couple of really big transitions. I mean, I studied, then I did a PhD, and then I stopped. And I was no longer a scientist. I went into startups and I did that for 9 years. And now I've been an investor since 2012, so that's now 14 years. Yeah. And I think you need to get to the point in everything, not in everything that you do, but you want to get to the point where you've either cracked something or you've certainly brought it to the point where you've been able to make the decision, either I got it done or I haven't got it done. And the funny thing is there is this thing that I've found where it's like there is almost no difference between I can't get it done and it can't be done. Because you can't, for you practically, it makes very little difference. And there's a point where when you run out of ideas and you run out of energy, you say, I can't get this done, I don't know how. Yeah? I've run out of ideas. That's the point where you need to stop. As long as you continue to have ideas and you know what's wrong, you probably feel compelled to continue doing what you're doing.
You were saying season 2 and 3 are usually the best ones, and then it starts to get boring over time. Was it also the points in your career where you approached season 5, 6, 7 and thought, okay, maybe it's about time I move on to something else? Or was it more intentional and strategically driven? Can you share a bit more?
No, I mean, I was basically, when I was in school, I just learned that I'm quite heavily drawn towards the natural sciences. Why? Because I never had any resonance with sort of social sciences, broadly speaking. I enjoyed history quite a lot in school, and I did English, okay, but then I did all of math, physics, chemistry, biology, all of the natural sciences I thought really, really fascinating. So I then went off and studied biology for a number of reasons, but biology in Freiburg was really super broad, right? It was like all the natural sciences, plus math, plus statistics, plus whatever they all did. There was like 2 years, was like exceptionally broad education. And then I specialized in genetics. And then it was simply finished because, thank God you don't stay at university forever.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a decision, it was just a fact of life. But then I decided that, I went to the UK on a stipend and I was suddenly finished after 3 years with a bachelor. And I couldn't go back to Germany because at the time in the 90s, a bachelor in Germany did not exist and it had no meaning. And I couldn't do anything with it. So then I thought, okay, I can either go back and I can do a master's, that would take me 2 years, or I stay in the UK and I do a PhD and it would take 3 years. And I thought, okay, PhD is better than a master. So I'll do a PhD. And then I got a stipend to do that and they paid for everything. And then I had no money, so I applied for all the things that paid for everything. There were 6 of them in the country. So I applied to all 6 and I got invited to 3 interviews and I got 2 job offers. I picked one of them.
Right. Amazing.
So that's literally how it worked, right? So, and then I did that and then it finished. Yeah. But I decided that at the end of this, that I didn't want to pursue a career as a professor. So that was a conscious choice. So then you could say that's strategic, but I don't think that was a strategic decision. That was more a function of understanding what I enjoy doing. And because I had built technology that we had, they had 2 parts to my PhD. One was my fundamental research and the other one was applied technology research. And I enjoyed the applied side far more than I did the research part. The research part. So that was a self-recognition process. Then I became involved and we set up a student society called Biology in Business. And I became the president of that. And then we had all of these. So basically the job was go and find all of the cool biotech companies out there and invite them in so that the CEOs would come and pitch their business to PhD students to potentially look for people to hire. So then I was sitting there in these lectures that I had organized. So there were like 10 of us or whatever. And then suddenly there were these people sitting in the audience. They were wearing the jackets and the suits. And they were clearly not scientists from the lab next door or anything. So there were some guys from London, yeah? So you go to these guys and say, oh, who are you? And it's like, oh, I'm a venture capitalist. It's like, oh, really? What's a venture capitalist? Yeah, I fund all these companies that are doing these technologies. It's like, so tell me how that works. Yeah, we have these funds and then we take money from these funds and then we invest in these companies. And if they're good, they make us much more money. And then we make a return for our investors in these funds. And I thought, that's the coolest shit ever.
Yeah, I can sit in the audience. I can be that guy.
And I thought, yeah, I applied to all of them and nobody took me. So
And that was your first touch point with
I didn't even know that
business?
this existed, right? So I was at the Institute of Biotechnology, and every group did applied research, and it was always about making companies with technology. And then I met the people who were financing that, and I suddenly realized if I could do a job like that, that would be enormous fun.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, but then that's when I graduated. This was in 2002, 2003. That was in the middle of a really, really deep recession. And well, it's the winter of venture capital after the technology bubble burst in the spring of 2000, right? And so there were no VC funds. Nobody had any money. The whole industry, the biotech industry in the UK was collapsing. The whole thing was just going nowhere. And so therefore, there was nothing for me to do. So instead, what I did is I became a biotechnology analyst in an information and research startup, because there I was talking to a lot of investors, but I didn't invest myself, right? So, but I had a job that was sort of came quite close to it. And then so I worked for a startup, and then I started a company myself.
Yes.
And then after I started the company, I made so many mistakes that I just got lots of mentors to help me make fewer mistakes. And then I learned a lot about lean startup methodology. I became very involved with the scene. And suddenly in London, I was one of the, I don't know how many people who knew more about that than most other people. And then people approached me and said, should we do a startup studio together?
Which was Forward Labs at that time.
Right. So then I did Forward Labs. That was part of Forward Internet Group. Yeah. So again, that wasn't a strategic decision. This is more interest-led, right? So I think the pattern that I have learned about myself, I just do things that interest me, and then I naturally get drawn into the next thing. It's a very natural transition, if you like, right? So then when I was doing Forward Labs, and also before then, I was mentoring founders because I thought they make too many mistakes. Yeah. And then obviously the accelerators came, and they knew that I was mentoring founders anyway. So they said, hey,
Techstars.
Well, at the time it was called Springboard, but John Bradford called and said, why don't you mentor? I've already picked 10 cool founders and we've given them money. Don't you want to come up to Cambridge and mentor 10 teams? And I said, yeah, sounds great, right? So I went up and mentored these folks. And then I did that. I invested in one of them, and I tried to help these guys. But then during demo day, I was sitting there, and then Brad Feld, who is of the co-founders of Techstars, was standing there. It was a pretty small lecture theater at the time. And then basically he was standing there, he was pitching Techstars and what it was all about. And I thought, this is the coolest shit.
Yeah.
So basically I said to John's like, how can I get your job? And then John made me a job offer to work with, it was called, they had a separate company. I didn't do it. It didn't make sense for me. But I mentored in the programs for years. And then at some point, when I stepped out of Forward Labs to move back to Germany, they approached me and said, do you want to run Techstars in Germany?
Berlin, right?
Yeah, in Berlin. Do you want to set this up and run this? I said, yeah, I can do that. Mm-hmm. I know how this works, right? And I did that for 4 years, and I was very successful. I mean, in the time when the first program I did with Bradford in London. So in that program, we had a company that was later called Sandbird, that was at some point valued at easily over $1 billion. And then 2015, we did the first Berlin program. And then we had a company there called Preply that's now very, very large. They haven't disclosed how large, but it's pretty significant. You can probably assume it's in that unicorn territory as well. So it was like the Techstars time in Berlin was like super golden.
Right.
But then again, the natural transition is I do Techstars. One of my LPs is Oliver Klaasen. We work through some issues. I resign, I tell him that I just want to write angel checks, and he calls me and says, hey, why don't we found an investment company together, and we pool capital, and he'll do the administration in his family office, and I'll do the investing and so forth, right? So the reason why I'm laboring this story is a little bit because you want to talk about transitions, right?
Yeah.
And if you think about it, certainly for me, all the transitions from one thing to the next were very organic and very interest-led. So I did something, and I became interested in something else. And then through the work that I was putting in my spare time, yeah, if you like, it transitioned into the next thing. And therefore it's always, when you transition, it's always a question of push and pull. So you get pushed out of from where you are. You don't want to do this. If you were highly interested, if you really wanted to do this thing, doesn't matter it would have to be an extraordinary pull from the other side. But it's always push and pull. So the new thing pulls you in and the old thing pushes you out. And it needs to be both. And typically, let's just say you're in a job, you're somehow unhappy. Typically, your boss will be not a great person to work for. That's the most frequent reason why people leave, right? The company is dysfunctional, your boss is dysfunctional, or there is an aspect of it. My commute, we talked about this before. There's a heavy dysfunctionality about what's going on in one way or the other. Yeah? So that pushes you out. And then you are drawn into the new thing because you have an interest that's quite natural, that has evolved over time. And certainly that's been for me, that's the case. But when I see people transitioning, I always see the push and the pull in almost every transition.